So I'll make the motion to approve tonight's agenda. Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, Director Kelsenberg, all those in favor of approving the agenda, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And I have not heard from Annie, so we'll just get going. We're going straight into the reports, but are we?
We told him. He
Okay.
probably forgot to turn on.
Okay.
Not actually live on air, so you won't see that.
Perfect. Do we want to bring Peter up then for the survey? Welcome, Peter.
Pleasure to be here with
Yeah. Excited to have you.
you. Just kick it off.
All yours.
Get right into it. All right.
Do we need to wait, or are we?
No, it's not live. You're just being
Oh,
recorded.
he's just, okay, perfect.
All right. To review with everybody what we undertook this time, we spoke with 400 randomly selected households across the district. This is fairly fresh data. The interviews were conducted between the 8th and the 24th. Average interview time was 9 minutes. Non-response rate was plus or minus, or 5.5%. And then the projectability is 5% in 95 out of 100 cases. Once again, the projectability, the margin of error is based on the size of the sample, not the percent of the universe. So 400 sample in Stillwater School District or 400 sample in Washington counties, plus or minus 5%. I'll put up some demographics for you so you can see the profile. 55% were cell phone only households, 9% had both landline only, and then 36% both landline and cell phone. If we look at demographics, the first set, we use demographics for two reasons: to validate the sample for updated census information, and then we can look at differences between groups as we get into the analysis. The first set of bars looks at how long the resident has lived in the school district. You have 36% that have been here for 10 years or less. You have 34% over 20 years. Median residence about 14 years, typical. 18% indicate that they have preschool children, 33% have a child attending the Stillwater School District, and then 59% are empty nesters. And that does not imply an age, it's just lack of presence of a child. So you could have a 27-year-old without a child. They're classified as an empty nester. So as we go through the results, just keep in mind, basically 6 out of 10 people do not have any children living in the school district. 47% are under 44 years old, while 32% are over 55 years old. Median on this one spread at about 46 years old is a typical resident. Continuing with the demographics, 15% are renters. The self-assessed home value, now this is always high. People are always more optimistic about what their home value actually is. Probably comes in at about $380,000. One item to keep in mind as you consider potentially a referendum in 2023 is the financial macroeconomics of a household. You have 45% indicating that they're financially stressed. That's actually the lowest I have this year. I've had all the way up to 59% in one school district. The norm right now is 52%. We're at the high now since the pandemic started. We're not at the level we were back at the start of the recession in 2008, 2009 when we hit 65%. We never got to that level, but we are growing now as it concerned the macro financial situation of the household. So you are on the lower end. Going back to 2019, and 2019 is years ago in public opinion research, I think you were at 27% financially stressed. So that's a pandemic, that's economic uncertainty and everything that's in the mix right now. Men and women were 50-50. Stillwater was the largest geographic area, followed by Lake Elmo, Woodbury, and then all the other communities are just classified as into the rest of the district. Any questions on demographics, methodology, or anything before we get into results? Hearing none. All right, the quality of rating of the education. We're just going to look at some general atmospherics to see if things have changed since 2019. On the overall quality of education, 4 years ago, 87%, Yeah, 87% rated it favorably. This time, 78% rated it favorably. A little bit of an uptick in the only fair or poor category. Your excellent rating has maintained, but we have seen this decline now over the course of the pandemic. People are very concerned about the overall quality of education being provided, learning loss happening, and all of those sorts of aspects. So this is in line with what we've seen across the metro and across the state over the past 2 years. What do they like most about the district? First off, teachers, 28%. And then we have another category, if we collapse the variety of programs and the 7% broad curriculum, actually what's being taught in the classroom. 26% is a statistical tie. And then the academic quality is on the, it comes in third. We combine excellent academics, good academics at 15%. This district's priorities are personnel and programming. And then you do have 10% that really adore the sports programs here. But some varies from district to district. Some are very focused on curriculum, some personnel, some academics. You actually have the tie with programming and personnel. Now, having asked what they like most, we always follow up with what's the most serious issue facing the district. This is open-ended, and they can tell us anything. You have 1 in 5 people point to large class sizes. That's a concern when you have over 20% focusing on one issue. Everything else, we have 2 others that hit double digits, but it's very low. Lack of funding, high taxes, we're going to talk about more specifically, because on top of the concern people have with their financial situation in their household, tax hostility is up quite a bit since everybody opened their tax statement back in November. Drugs and alcohol, lack of discipline, too political, all the way down, staff shortages, mental health. But at the outset, you have 3 issues hitting double digits, one that I classify as a concern, broad-based across the district, with 1 in 5 already pointed to large class sizes. How's the district done on meeting the learning needs of all students? Most, only some, or very few? This is actually a very good result, considering the baseline is pre-pandemic. You actually now have a majority of folks indicating that all student learning needs are being met. Not very many districts have a majority at this point in time indicating this. So that is a positive change over the course of 4 years. The theme, though, following up with those that say most, only some, or very few, we ask, is there a specific type of student whose learning needs are not being met? You can see a very clear pattern there. Struggling, average, underachievers, and in the BIPOC community. Basically focused on, it's not focused on gifted and talented so much. It's really is the average to below average, with the struggling and the underachievers being the concern. So that's the focus of those having the concern, but the 51% saying all student learning needs being met is very strong. Yes?
I just had a question about struggling. Were they more specific? I mean, did you use the term struggling to incorporate a lot of different kinds of answers? I mean, what do we know about struggling?
Academically struggling is what is, I think it's how it's labeled. It's an open-ended, and then we code it on that. So academically struggling.
Okay, so it could have been in any sort of field, right? It could have been in math. It could have been in.
Oh, we didn't dice.
We didn't get into that level of detail.
No, because
okay.
it is. If you look at we have 41% in the category, and it's 22% of 41%. So it's roughly about 8% of the overall sample. Mm-hmm. So to micro dissect it really would kind of get,
pointless. Yeah. Okay.
And feel free on these charts when they're up there if you have questions.
Can I just go back to the last
Yep.
one really quick? Because I was, the large class sizes, do you ever divide these up by residents, like retirees? Like, where are the common concerns based on a demographic area?
Yeah, we can look at that in the analysis, and especially households with children.
Okay, because I would assume like the large class sizes would be households with children familiar with the schools, but I don't know for certain.
And with large class sizes, we didn't go in depth. Sometimes in school district surveys, we'll go in depth and say average elementary class sizes are X, too high, too low, so people are reacting to a specific number. That's always interesting.
I think you did that last time you were
Yeah, I
here,
think back in
because-
2019,
Yes, you
we
did.
looked at that.
It was because it was by grade. It was
It
like
was-
certain grades
Yeah,
were.
elementary, middle, and high school is how we typically have done it in the past. And I think it would be something to explore if we're gonna do just a short brush fire survey to a look at the bond referendum specifics.
Right. No, I would agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's our evaluation of the quality of education compared to 5 years ago? 35% this time indicate it's better, 13% say it's worse, so it is a 3-to-1 ratio, better to worse. Right now, the norm is 2-to-1. Over the course of the pandemic, there was a point in time in the fall of 2020, that school year, where we had more people saying worse than better. So there is a sense now that you're starting to come out, and the quality is moving in the right direction in the minds of residents. Some specific perceptions. Does this district spend taxpayers' money effectively and efficiently? That's actually up 9 points from 2019 to 72%. Norm on that right now is 57%, indicating taxpayers' money is being spent effectively and efficiently. Have you spent past referendum funds responsibly? That's up 12 points. And this one varies from district to district, as along with the next one, depending on when the last referendum was. And so do you ask for a tax increase only as a last resort? That's up 15 points from 57 to 72%. Is the district held accountable for the education? It's down, it's on the edge of statistical significance, 81 to 75, with 5% increase in the disagreement. On the financial matters, though, you have a net plus of 10% or more across the board. And as we get to an overall evaluation of financial management, I'll just paint a picture on where residents view the district on financial credibility. Do they view that they receive a good value for the investment in education? Absolutely, almost 90%. Does the district do a good job of involving the community? On this one, you're actually very high at 78%. Before the pandemic, the norm on this was 75%. And the pandemic has obviously caused it to be very difficult to involve the community from virtual and everything like that. So the norm on this right now is about 68, 69%. Whatever you've done over the course of the pandemic, you've done a really good job of making the community at least feel that it can be involved in decision making. The last statement on this is I call this the dipping our toes in the water of referendum, because the statement is the schools are a good investment and I would support a property tax increase to protect that investment. We haven't told them if it's a bond referendum, an operating levy, a tech levy, if it's $5 a month or $5 a year. The key is how many people in concept disagree with that statement. That tells us what the core opposition is at the outset. And we have 26% that disagree with that statement. We always want that to be less than 30%. That's your core opposition. It's a good position to be at. Doesn't mean that the 65% are going to support everything. It's meaning they're willing to have a discussion about a property tax increase depending on what the uses are for. Job performance ratings. This chart basically speaks for itself. When we look back when I was presented to the board and administration back in 2019. On the board, the positive rating's gone up 18%. On the administration, the positive rating's gone up 9 points. And the teachers were always consistently highly rated, this time at 86% positively rated. Overall evaluation then of financial management. 53% rate the financial management positively, 42% unfavorably, and 6% are unsure. I put an asterisk on this because in the midst of this survey came the news of the settlement. Okay, so it was at the start of the survey. So that is baked into the cake, shall we say, of people's perceptions of financial management. The norm on financial management is 50%. So if we look back and go back to in 2019, we're at 49%. We've gone up, not statistically significantly, with a major development in the course of the survey happening, dealing with financial matters. When we look back then on those statements on perceptions of taxpayers' money effectively and efficiently, last resort, spending referendum funds responsibly, the district does have financial credibility out there, okay? And so residents will evaluate the proposal based on its merits, not bring in additional baggage from the past. that has happened here in other years. I alluded to the property tax climate. You are now a hostile property tax climate. 53% indicate their total property taxes are high, 39% average. The good news, they don't blame you. 38% indicate their school taxes are high. It's actually a very marked drop, 15 points from total to the school taxes. It indicates that their concern is at the city or the county. I always joke, in the good old days, doing this 30 years, we used to ask, who do you blame? Cities and counties got really mad. So we came up with this idea to ask if the animus is focused at the school district. It's not focused at the school district. That's the good news. The bad news is cities and counties, for the most part, don't have to ask for a property tax increase to increase their levy. You're the only one that gets the cherished role of having to have a vote for a property tax increase. So this pretty much matches what we see now in property tax climate. The high I have this year is 68% in the high category. That's a poisonous property tax climate. And the higher that goes, the more folks that are just going to be reflexively against anything. But I do not have a district in 2023 that has less than 50% in the high category. I think people, there might have been a naivete early last year when everybody got their home assessments and they were all excited how much their home went up. And then they got their property tax statement on November 15th and realized, oh my goodness, that means I actually pay more taxes. And so it has been a marked increase across the metro and across the state on property tax hostility. Is the district adequately funded? Well, we're at a statistical tie. This is the historic. 49% say yes, 41% say no, and 11% are unsure. Basically, they're saying we don't know. Now, telling every district there's an asterisk on this chart right now, because what comes out of St. Paul when they do all their magic and how it's marketed will impact people's perceptions. In 2021, a lot of districts had a similar result early in the year. Then the governor did what I call his victory lap and talked about the largest increase in education funding in the history of the state of Minnesota. Districts that were at a 50-50 tie like this, by election day when they're asking for operating levy funds, had 75% saying they were already adequately funded. Okay? This will impact what happens in St. Paul and how it's marketed out of St. Paul if and when they do their victory lap. What's their predisposition? At this point, I put up the historic on this for 10 years. You've been relatively stable over the years. This time you actually have, it's 23% against all, 22% for all, with 55% persuadable. What's interesting is you actually have 10% more people that are willing to see what the proposal is. I'm always, this one always, 30 years ago, we'd have 75, 80% saying I'm persuadable. I'm for some and against others. Now, 50% of people have made up their minds with no information because we haven't told them what it's for. That's just your core opposition, your core support. It doesn't matter what's being asked for. So it is unique that you do have that 10% increase in the persuadable category. They're willing to listen to what's being asked for. What's the evaluation of buildings and facilities? Some interesting changes, some softening, shall we say, in the perceptions of buildings and facilities. 72% indicated they were excellent or good back in 19, this time 75%. But you can see the excellent rating shifted, dropped by a third to 7%. So the discussion then isn't that the buildings are terrible. They still do not believe that. It's how any potential improvements you request are going to move them from good to excellent. And going back to what they like most, there are not many districts like bright, shiny buildings for bright, shiny buildings' sake. Tie it to programming and curriculum, okay? And that's the shift, and get people to understand that we're going to move buildings from good to excellent with that link. Now, some perceptions. In 2019, looking back, did people indicate that they thought housing construction had increased during the past 5 years? 65% said yes. This time, an increase of 10% up to 75%. What about the anticipation that housing construction will continue to increase? 75% 4 years ago, up to 83% this time. So the historic viewpoint and the future viewpoint is housing construction has happened and it will continue to grow in the district. What about its impact on student enrollment? In the past 5 years, 4 years ago, 55% said it impacted student enrollment. That's up to 68% this time. And do they anticipate it continuing in the next 5 years? 72 to 78. So on both housing and student enrollment, you don't have to sell or teach people, learn them, that this has happened and the expectation will be to continue to happen. The discussion should be this, because this question is, does the district have enough space to accommodate this growth? 56% in 2019 indicated, yes, you did. It's down to 47%, but you can see you really have this distinct tie. They know they're coming. There's really no doubt in the community. The question is whether the buildings currently meet the needs of that coming enrollment growth. Demographic reports. In the history with this district, this has always been a touchy subject, shall we say. This time, we're up 6 points in the trusting of demographic reports. 69% believe that they're accurate. 17% do not believe they're accurate. The other item to look at with the growth in enrollment is the similarity of facilities. How important is it that the buildings be similar across the district? 83% 4 years ago said it was important. 76% indicate that it's important this time. You can see, though, there is a shift from very important to somewhat important. But you still have 3/4 indicating this is important. Do they believe that the buildings are similar across the district? Once again, like the adequacy of space pretty much mirrors this. You have less people saying yes, but it's more this tie. So any sort of information campaign, when you're looking and discussing and making decisions surrounding a potential bond referendum, you really don't have to share the story. You really don't have to indicate why it's important. People believe it's important. You have to tell them what the realities are on the ground, with buildings being similar and enrollment and growth in the district. So, would they support a property tax increase for facilities needs? We get 27% that say nothing at this point. We always want that under 35%. It's very good at the outset. And you don't have, typically it's a ski slope, I always say, from the nothing straight down to the higher dollar amounts. You actually have a mountain peak at $10 a month. The median comes in, the typical resident will support about $15 a month. Okay, and I always tell school boards that number is not set in stone. There's an elasticity to that number. There can also be retraction from that number depending on the components being asked for. And that's why we go through the list and ask specifically, would you support a property tax increase for these purposes? Not surprisingly, what leads the list is safety and security, 79%. That is consistent across the state. And that is not an indictment on the current safety and security. I was just running a survey for a district this morning before I came out here. 90% indicated the district provided safe and secure learning environment. 85% supported safety and security improvements. Between Newtown, Connecticut, and now Uvalde, folks you can never be too safe. They're willing to invest in safety and security basically at all costs. You have 3 items then that are right at 2/3 level support. Oakland Middle School classroom space, early learning classroom space, I believe we phrased that in the southern part of the district, not building specific. And then replacing Lake Elmo Elementary School. 62% replacing Andersen Elementary School. And then 2 items that have mixed results. We have 40% opposition in concept. And that's the Afton Lakeland Elementary School gym and the new high school auditorium. So going back to looking at this chart, that say $15 a month tolerance. if the package would include the top 5, 62% or higher with less than 40% opposition, you have elasticity. Especially the auditorium has an opportunity to become a lightning rod, with 41% indicating in concept they're opposed to it. The Afton Lakeland Elementary School gym could also be. I'm getting very concerned about the environment of 2023 when we look at macroeconomics, property tax hostility, and everything like that. And I flash back to 2008, 2009, where districts basically only passed have-to-haves, not nice-to-haves. And regardless, this is not me saying it, this is the public saying it, gymnasiums and auditoriums are nice-to-haves, not have-to-haves in the minds of the public. An overall assessment then, do the ideas of these, overall, what we've talked about, are they a good idea or a bad idea? 69% indicate a good idea, 26% bad idea. There's not a lot of intensity on this one. Only 17% feel strongly, but it's 5-1 in favor of strong good idea versus strong bad idea. So it nets out, even with two options having 40% opposition in concept, there's enough support overall for those top ones that brings it up, that it's a pretty strong mandate. You're moving in the right direction. Now, a couple questions around the Andersen and Lake Elmo elementary schools. We first asked folks, were they aware the Andersen Elementary School was built in 1919 and the Lake Elmo Elementary School was built in 1920? 50% said yes, 49% said no. So that obviously, if that's going to be part of a potential bond referendum, that number should increase. Now, you're never going to have 100% of people aware of that number. If you can get 70%, that's impressive. Does it impact their support for building a new elementary school in Bayport/Baytown Township and Lake Elmo? 46% indicated it makes them more likely, 23% much more likely. In looking at those that, on this one, did they support or oppose replacing them in this chart? And looking at making them much more likely in this one, it moves about 5% of people said that they opposed, but it made them more likely, which then puts the replacing Lake Elmo at 70%, replacing Andersen at 67%. Kind of puts it up into that 2/3 category then, that top 5 is a pretty rock solid proposal, as long as it's in, if it's at $20 a month or under, it would look very good. Then a couple questions on communications. Last time, 80% indicated that they rated communications positively, 76% this time, statistically insignificant. This one, the norm is 65%, so about 11 points higher than the norm. How informed do they feel about board and administration decisions? More so. In 2019, 60% indicated they felt well-informed or somewhat informed. Now it's 85%. 75%. So an increase of 15% feeling informed. And that is important because we saw that increase in positivity across the board on a lot of aspects. And so more information has not bred contempt. It's actually bred favor in the minds of residents. This one, what's folks' primary source of information? This is open-ended. Grapevine is alive and lush in the district. Always has been. Always has been. Going back to the days of David Weddergren. David Weddergren was the first superintendent I ever met with in 1994 when I was fresh out of college. So I always have this fondness for coming back to Stillwater. But it's always been a small town on the edge of the metro area. But we see more pronounced focus because they're telling us this is their primary source of information. Back in the day, people didn't necessarily want to admit that unless you're in outstate Minnesota. And as we see local newspapers decline, what we see is especially over 55-year-olds who would normally have said the local newspaper, whether the newspaper doesn't exist anymore or the coverage isn't as broad as it used to be, now indicate that they're getting their information from other people. The newsletter mailings, 19%, e-newsletter email, 17, website, 13, local newspaper, 12, social media, 10%. Social media is double the norm on this as an open-ended response for people to indicate it's their primary source of information. Part of it is people don't want to admit that their primary source of information is social media. Kind of for some people it's a badge of shame on that one, but there's an age divide on it, but there's also a political divide on social media now. Now, what's the best way for them to receive information? This one, if we look at electronic versus print, do they want to push a key or have something in their hands? Newsletter mailings at 27%, local newspaper at 11%, the Pioneer Press at 2%. You have 40% that want something in their hands. On the flip side, 25% want the e-newsletter or an email. The district website at 9%, social media at 6%, you have 40% indicating that they want electronic. So you have to do both. This was a closed-ended list though, and the unique one on this one is 16% volunteered that they want their primary source of information to be somebody else, word of mouth. That normally doesn't translate over. People will say I get it from somebody else as a primary source, but they don't want to admit that that's their preference. So on this one, their actual primary source matches their preference when they're getting it from somebody else. Yep.
Just out of curiosity, what's happened to that, the local newspaper as a source over time? You know, like 10 years ago, what were you seeing in that category?
I'd have to go back historically. The paper out here traditionally was very strong.
Well, I mean, when I moved here, it was being published 6 days a week, and now it's published once a week.
Yep.
And so there's a big decrease in the amount of news that people literally can get from the local paper.
Right.
So.
I can look that up for the report.
It's okay.
Yeah,
No,
no,
it's
just to
fine.
go back in history.
I was just sort of curious. I'm a newspaper person, so
Right.
I'm just sort of curious.
Yeah, because really, I mean, there's one newspaper for the local community papers that is still dominant across the metro area. That's the Prior Lake American. Still have 70% of people saying that they get their primary source of information from it, and it dominates. Everything else, they've either gone out of business, pulled back service, those sorts of things, and that vacuum being created. Because if you're a non-parent, you really don't, getting something electronically is a proactive move. Okay, I have to subscribe to get an email or an e-newsletter. I have to actually decide to go to the website and do those sorts of things, as opposed to it coming to me, either through the paper or a newsletter. And so what more people have found now, especially over 55-year-olds, and it's over 55-year-old men more than women, if we look at this across the metro area, it's just easier to go to the local restaurant, have a cup of coffee, and solve all the world's problems than to do anything proactive and look at anything electronically. And it bears out in the final chart. Is each of these a major source, minor source, or not a source at all? Informal discussions with friends and neighbors dominate this chart. 85% or 89% indicate it is a major or minor source, 44% a major source. Next highest is the newsletter with a reach of 64%, impact of 29%. Local newspaper, relatively strong in comparison to many others, but only 20% saying it's a major source. So the grapevine's something to be cognizant. It always has been here. Yes.
And that was my question. I mean, how does this compare? I mean, we know, and we've known for a long time, that the grapevine in this district is extremely strong. How does that compare to other districts that you examined?
It is always, okay, your grapevine has always been more outstate than metro area. Outstate, it's just kind of, you talk to neighbors and everything. That's why I always said this is kind of like a small town school district on the edge of the metro area. It is more pronounced, though, than it has been in the past. How does it compare? Most districts now, as newspapers diminish, are getting to where you were in the past. Okay? Most of the districts do not have, they'll at least have either a newsletter or the website being number one as a primary source of information. You're one of very few districts that has the word of mouth as the number one primary source of information. But more importantly, with 1 in 6 saying they prefer to receive that, that's the highest we have in the metro area as a preference for receiving information that way.
Okay, thank you.
The friends and neighbors part, it seems kind of high to me, like 44%. I just can't imagine that these people are actually out meeting in the coffee shop and having these conversations, or behind the fence in the backyard. But maybe there's it still could be social media. It's somebody getting this information, sharing it on their Facebook page like us old people do, or Instagram like the younger ones do. So it's friends and neighbors, but it's still social media. Is there?
Well, we have social medias up here where we go through Facebook, Nextdoor, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. And so break it out. Now, these is informal discussions. And so this is everything from school events to church, out shopping, community events, all of those sorts of things.
When people answered the question, did they check one, or could they check
They could check
as
'em
many
all.
as they wanted to?
They could check them all.
Okay.
Yep. That's the last one. I think I'll just say briefly, as you think about the potential bond referendum, if we look at the atmospherics in the district, there's a stability that's been provided since I did a survey in 4 years ago. And there's really no red flags in the atmospherics that you need to work on. Anything you can do, I think, to help people understand the need when you look at enrollments and when you look at similar buildings. It will be helpful. You don't have to share the narrative of what's happened or what the expectation is. You don't have to convince people that the demographic reports are correct. There's 15% out there that'll never believe them. You don't have to worry about arguing with them. They're not going to support anyways at the outset. The real key on this is to balance the macro issues of people's taxes and their financial situation, what's going to happen in St. Paul with an appetite and an understanding that there is support out there. And I think there, if we look at those top 5 areas that we tested a property tax increase, and if we pair that as closely as you can, before the 2000, if I was out here in 2017 and saw these numbers, I would have said you could have gone for $25 a month with those support levels. I don't feel comfortable saying that with the macroeconomics. I think as close as you can be to $15 a month within those 5 projects, the better. But there is some elasticity there if you need to go above that.
Can I go to the most serious issue slide really quick? Because I'm noticing, I often will reflect, even though I know it's a different world now, to your 2019 survey. So I just thought it would be good for the board to know the class sizes did register last time, but it was at 13, where now it's at 21. So, it's definitely risen the ranks there. But I think what I am curious about is, a lot of that is space and bond, but a lot of that is operating money to put a teacher in a classroom to shrink those class sizes, which is really costly. Do voters discern the difference between operating,
No.
in your experience, or facilities?
No, in the 90s, we used to ask the question, do you know the difference between a bond referendum and operating levy? And, it was like pie. It was the constant. 20% had some idea and could tell you bonds are for buildings, levies for learning. 80% had no idea. It's a pot of money that goes to it. To your point on class sizes, though, when people talk, some districts we've gone into and told folks to cut class sizes by 1 would cost the district $1 million. Instead of using the $1 million to cut class sizes by 1, would you support the district investing that $1 million in personalized education, social, emotional, mental health, those sorts of things? Even parents, large majorities, support the programming instead of the reduction by 1. When people think and talk about cutting class sizes, it's not moving from 26 to 25. That's a distinction without a difference. They're talking about going from 26 to 16, okay? And so when you put that out there for people to understand the true impact of cutting class sizes by 1 student, they will prioritize then the programming because that's just 26 to 25 is not what they have in mind.
Any other questions? This is always such amazing information to have. In terms of if we were to go through these, given what you're talking about, would like touring buildings be a good idea? Like opening up for community members? It
Yes.
seems like there is a lack of understanding how old some of our, that one slide was
Yep.
kind of telling to me that half
Yeah.
the people don't know.
Yeah, it's always important. I mean, keep in mind that earlier demographic, when we started, 59% were empty nesters.
Right.
And many people haven't been in a building since they were in school. It goes back to, doing this late 90s, first part of this century, when people switched over to these fancy whiteboards instead of the chalkboard behind it. We actually there were some districts that did tours with senior citizen groups to come in and show them what a whiteboard was. Because, well, heck, I go back to when you used to take the chalk erasers down and clean them out in the back room and everything like that, and to show them the technology and what it could do. And I think whatever you can do to show them, any sort of the needs and where the buildings, one thing now is the flexible learning spaces, bringing senior groups in and showing them what a classroom looks like today. Because some of them have been in a classroom in 55 years. This is a modern classroom. Similarly, I think to show them what a building from 1919 looks like, because it does have, 5% might not sound like a lot, but 5% is significant shift in public opinion of people saying, I oppose this in concept, and then finding out that these buildings are over 100 years old and saying, okay, because only half were aware of it. So I think there absolutely would be a benefit to that.
Well, again, thank you very much. This is very helpful.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.